Well, hello everyone. This is R. Michael Fisher, the director and the main instructor of the Fearology Institute. Um, just got on board. We're starting the program this July 2018, and I just thought I would explore using video recording here, thanks to the Zoom program. Thanks to Janet Shepard for offering me to utilize this for educational purposes only. So the Fearology Institute obviously is something about fearology, and what is fearology and who's to say what fearology is becomes a very interesting issue. And I'll just say right off the top that fearology as the study of the relationship between fear and life, this interrelationship, this very intimate interrelationship, has been something that's been going on since the beginning of life, really. And so we're looking at 4 billion years or so that fearology is something that could be important to today, and it's been important to all of history, except we haven't talked about fear directly, or fearology directly, throughout history. We've only probably recently, particularly, and I'm thinking in the last 100 years plus, really started to think about, as a species, our relationship with fear in a systematic way, not just in a way that we knew fear was always important to human existence and to all organisms, really. But we've really started to now come to see that we have to understand fear in a new way, in a different way, in a more systematic way. So here we are in 2018. It's taken us a long time as a species to gather the intelligence, to gather the awareness, to come out of our own denial, to come out of our own fear enough to actually say, hey, we really need to talk more about fear as a species, as a society, in our organizations, in our family systems, in our schools, wherever it might be. Obviously in the clinic, the psychological clinics, and in the medical psychiatric world, fear might have been talked about a lot longer, a few hundred years back, and so on, and philosophers and theologians. However, not in a systematic way that we said, well, we want to study fear actually by putting a fearist lens or a fearological lens on the topic of fear itself. Now there becomes the shift in consciousness, the shift in thinking. So again, this is my first video on using this. I don't know if this is even going to work, but I'm going to try it, and I'll eventually try to post it on the Fearology Institute website that we're using, which is on the Fearlessness movement, NING, which I started in 2015, thanks to the help of Barbara Bickle, my partner. One of the topics that I wanted to enter briefly, not to talk so much about the Fearology Institute, that could be another video. I wanted to explore with you, in my own thinking at the same time, how do we make fearology, in a sense, practical? So first of all, we have to get around the language of fearology as being a problem. Some people say, why create another ology? It sounds silly anyway, and how could that be legitimate? Well, just to let you know, there are all kinds of new ologies out there in the postmodern world, which is the world that's been going on since the last 50, 60 years or more. And there's a turn where we've started to realize the old disciplines like psychology or biology and these other ones that are out there, sociology and so on, they have their limits as a discipline. So there's a lot of hybrid disciplines, or sub-disciplines, some people call it, coming along. Terrorology, we've got panicology, we've got victimology, traumatology, terrorology. The new ologies are out there and they're coming along. And so even emotionology, that's right. So fearology is another one of these. Let's say that it has the potential to be as important as certainly terrorology. Terrorology is very restricted in what it's interested in, and criminology and these kinds of ologies, but fearology is very broad, and hopefully also can be very specialized and very powerful as a method or a set of methods and a discipline of knowing. So that's my aim, is to promote fearology, not just in a popular cultural way of using, you're practicing fearology, which usually means people are fear-mongering or being excessively fearful when they don't really need to. And there's sort of derogatory terms out there on the internet you'll find, or public speech around fearology as well. I'm not talking about those kinds of uses of fearology. So probably since 2000, I've focused on a very more systematic notion of fearology as the study of the relationship of fear and life. This interrelationship, this very intimate interrelationship. Topic for today, in all that intro, there is a topic, and it's simply, how do we actually get fearology out there to be listened to, for people to listen to us, to listen to me, to listen to anyone who's a student in the Fearology Institute in this training program? I would start with the first thing is to understand that fearology ultimately is about, quote, I hate to say this, the business of fear. And that really, the moment I say that, is the moment that I'm really saying is fear is only of interest to humans, really, and I include myself, when we are interested in fear management and / education. So ultimately, if we're actually interested in having a conversation about fear, my point is that, and it's a theoretical point, hypothetical point, we're actually interested in fear management / education, fear education, just like sex education. We're actually interested in somehow learning something so that we'll be more effective managers of fear. And if you don't like that word manager, which I don't really like either, but it does speak to a whole lot of things, and it's a common language for a lot of people to connect to. But what I want to say is that right off the top, fearology is involved in this interest, this business of managing fear better. The problem is that there are a lot of people out there, and have been for a long time, publishing, speaking, writing, teaching, indoctrinating even, how to know what fear is, how to know how to manage fear better so that you can be successful, and many other things. Okay, so that's the world of fear management education, is what I call it, FME for short, fear management education. So I started there, and I said, well, anything about fear has to be put within that context of fear management education. That's the umbrella. That's what holds the whole discourses, the whole interest, the whole motivations for why do we want to know more about fear anyway. Okay, so that aside, and the problem of, well, what is fear? Who gets to define it? Fearology moves into this more systematic study. So it's about fear management, obviously, education in the same way. However, the fear management folks out there in plethora and books on how to fear, how to conquer it, work with it, befriend it. There's all kinds of titles and names. I've studied thousands of those works and people's promoting those works. And I will say that I obviously took on fearology because I was not satisfied with the way that folks of all kinds had taken on the study and teaching about fear and fear management. All right, so that kind of gets you down to why I'm going down a different road, although a related road, and one that I want to always be connected to those other roads of people's explorations of fear and management education. It's not about dissing where they've gone and what information they've created, knowledge, experience. It's merely that I'm not satisfied with it. It is not, I'm going to say, holistic. It is not integral enough in a real full, rich dimension of width and breadth to the knowledge about fear and fear management and education. Okay, and I'm not going to say a lot more about me. You can check out my bios and all kinds of publications I have on the internet. Go to Google Scholar, for example, look up my name, R. Michael Fisher. But besides all those things, the topic again, you can see it takes me a while to spin down to the topic, but obviously there's no one topic for any of these recordings I do. They are multifaceted, multi-related, and multi-webbed to many other topics. That's why I spin a bit around all these things to just show they're complex. Yeah, fear is complex. It's not simple. And fear management people, folks, those teachers, writers, typically, few rare exceptions, make fear very simple. R. Michael Fisher and the Fearology movement, if you want, or the Fearology Institute, all my work makes fear complex. I'm interested in complicated conversations. So if you're looking for a simple conversation, probably don't want to talk to me for very long. I'll just really disturb you and fish you off, basically, because I turn everything into a much more complex set of theories, philosophies, approaches, lenses, perspectives, multiple, holistic, and integral in how to understand and work with the fear and, yes, manage it better on this planet, teach about it better, improve our fear education on this planet. So that's kind of the spin. But how do we get out there and talk to people about complicated conversations around fear? Well, it's hard. So that's what I'm addressing just briefly here, which I'll only introduce today in this video. So don't go out if you're a fearologist, trained or just self-identified fearologist, which is fine by me. I'd like you to be trained, but you might just want to self-identify as a fearologist of some seriousness and sincerity. Just don't go out and start promoting fearology or your brilliance about fear or whatever, because you know what? It won't go over very well for the most part. There'll always be some people interested. My experience is that most people do not want people promoting in their face more things and more stuff and more expertise. And we've had enough of it on the planet. It's annoying to me too. So more what I ask you to do as a fearologist practically is to start thinking about what are some of the problems that people have with fear, to start having conversations, what are their needs that might involve fear. That could be in an individual, it could be a family system, it could be an organizational system, it could be a government, it could be a nation, it could be the world. If you want to go big, it could be the cosmos. If you want to go big, mega. So what are the needs and what are the wants, desires, and ideals of how people, systems, organizations would like to operate? And I use the word, well, you know, you could move from a culture of fear in your organization to a culture of fearlessness. Are you interested in how that might work? Well, I don't have formulas and I don't have simple, 7 steps will get you there. A lot of people in the fear management business, as I said earlier, are into that. And that may be marketable and practical, but as a fearologist, that's definitely not the only way, and it's certainly not a priority way for me to work. And what I think a professional or a good academic scholar or fearologist, how they would approach these problems in this analysis. So you're working with people and you got to create a conversation. Got that? Point 1. Creating a conversation on fear that is not a simple conversation, that is a complicated conversation that involves systematic analysis and systematic solutions that go with that complexity. And that's like any good profession. You've got to do research. You've got to have multiple ways of pulling in knowledge and information, multiple methodologies to collect knowledge. Build knowledge from multiple dimensions and multidisciplinary. So fearology is transdisciplinary, as I say. Some people may think that's a good thing. Some people may think that's a lot of blah, 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 and just makes a mess of things because it's, not one discipline simply. And that's true. It is a discipline of fearology, and at the same time, it's transdisciplinary. So start with that paradox. But I actually think that's a really reasonable and rational approach to fear, the study of fear. Create those conversations. Don't go around promoting fearology and trying to sell something to people. I say that very cautiously and with a lot of sincerity, because one of the things that is so problematic in the real fear problem today that I see that's controlling so much of society, and quote, fear's empire, as I sometimes use the term and others have, is that somebody is always trying to sell you the antidote to fear. Number one, they want to make you afraid. So this is how advertising works. Promotion makes someone afraid, and then you get their attention, then you scare them a little bit more, and then you scare them to the point where they think they don't have the resources to actually work with that problem of fear, and then you sell them the answer and the so-called cura, the therapy, the solution, the medicine. And this selling of promoting more fear to then sell what will solve the fear or manage the fear problem, this is a deadly combination. I call it the fear-hope syndrome. Create fear, then create hope, then see how much you can monetize that. It's a horrible kind of thing, and it's something that the fearologist has to be very cautious about. And again, you want to create these conversations, you want to really sincerely help people and help organizations and systems to better manage fear. But if we're going to sell more fear, and then try to create the hope that fearology is the answer, I am not interested in that program, that coding. And so I would certainly suggest any serious fearologist worth their salt and worth their intelligence, a good intelligence and an educated intelligence, they would not be into that kind of marketing. However, in some ways, it's almost impossible to avoid that kind of thing, because as soon as you use the topic fear and you bring up fear in a conversation, the system, the way we've been also conditioned, socialized in our education systems, I'm going to just talk about the Western world, but I think you can generalize to a lot of the world, certainly in modern times, is we're triggered. We're triggered by the word fear. It's fear itself. Something Robert Sardello, a great depth Jungian psychologist and spiritual psychologist, wrote in a beautiful book back in 1999. Freeing the Soul from Fear, I think was the title. And anyway, he said, one of the biggest problems we have is in how to talk about fear without raising more fear. He also said a lot of other things, which I still respect to this day. And I've taken it on to really think about, well, yeah, how would we do that? How would we be able to have conversations about fear, which we have to have, without bringing up more fear in people? And the other tradition that I've used and studied for 3 decades now, and pretty much more or less, is an understanding fear and fearlessness, is there's something called the gift of fearlessness, and that is to be able to offer, let's just say, a discussion, attention on the topic of fear without raising more fear in the process. Or we may raise more fear, but to be able to be conscious of it and to move it in a way that actually promotes fearlessness. And that means that I, as a fearologist, have to be thinking about how am I giving and offering a gift of fearlessness to the other, which is I am here to help work with fear and work with your fear, work with our fear as a species even, without making us more afraid and without trying to sell, God, authority, make money, make getting elected, etc., without using it to unethical means. So today's little blurb, as I'm ending here, is about the ethics of being a fearologist, how to create fear conversations. And you'll probably notice that I haven't given a lot of specifics and a lot of examples, which I can certainly do in another video. I just wanted to introduce this area of ethical concern, distinctions about what the fearologist is compared to what most fear management people are doing. They're not so concerned, as I can tell from the literature, as I can tell from listening to videos, they're not concerned with this ethical problem, this big umbrella problem that I'm creating, this complicated problem I'm creating around the study of fear and its interrelationship with life. So that's a lot of intro material. And I think the main thing is to listen to this video again as a practical strategy to then ask questions, create dialogues with me and or others around this. Probe around if you want to look and see what the Fearology Institute is doing. I'll be glad to send out more information on that if you're interested. Again, a lot of this is you'll find very quickly on the internet, the Fearology Institute. But beyond that, Fearology Institute, I'm really talking about just practicing fearology. And you don't have to come to the Fearology Institute to practice fearology in a good way. So I think that's probably good for a first video. Yeah, I'll listen to this myself and see if it makes any sense. Okay.